The strongest hero is betrayed by humanity and reincarnates as an overpowered Dark Lord. In the year 447, there was a huge war around the world between the 6 heroes and the Demon Lord. The Demon Lord's army of skeletons rushes into the battlefield to face the heroes. But the heroes have been blessed with godly powers and now have angel forms. The Demon Lord Leonis was sitting in his room chamber watching everything from his ball. All his strongholds have been defeated and this is their last line of defense. The skeletons manage to clap some human soldiers, but one of the heroes has the power to bring them back to life. Suddenly, a huge tree-like creature appears, making the Demon Lord angry because he recognizes it as the Archsage hero who quit being human to get more power. Leonis gets up and summons his staff to join the fight, but his Fenrir companion and loyal general stops him, reminding Leonis that he made a promise to the goddess of rebellion. She had entrusted him to do something when he was still human, so Leonis decided to accept defeat. He drops his staff and walks toward a door while his castle is being destroyed. Before entering, he promised that he would rise again in 1,000 years and reclaim his throne. And so, he sealed his own soul in the Grand Mausoleum. 1,000 years later, we then see 2 girls exploring the castle ruins of Leonis. Celia and Regina are on a mission to scout the ruins, because they have reports that some monsters called voids are building their nests there. They walk through a corridor and reach a huge door. Celia recognizes it as the King's Mausoleum, where Demon Lord Kings decide to rest waiting for their final days. Regina tries to open it but thinks they need to pick up something to blow it apart. Celia then notices some writings on the door and uses her phone which language it is. She realizes the door is alive and touches it. Suddenly, the door activates and opens up. She picks up her gun and steps inside, where she finds a huge crystal. She then realizes there's a person inside and decides to help him. We then see Leonis in a barren place. He sees Roselia, the god he once made a promise to. He says that he finally has found her, and she replies that it's been over 1,000 years since they met. Leonis explains he couldn't do anything against the god powers given to the heroes, so he decided to seal his soul to keep his promise to her. She replies that she's happy that he still remembers it and walks away into the air. Leonis tries to stop her, but she simply says she hopes to meet him again. Meanwhile, Celia is trying to shoot the crystal to rescue Leonis, who's the person inside. He complains about the noise and wonders if it's been 1,000 years already. He guesses the reincarnation ritual was successful. Leonis then notices Celia trying to shoot the crystal. He realizes she's human and thinks she's trying to rob his grave. So, he decides to show her the power of the reincarnated Demon Lord. He uses his magic to shatter the crystal and knock her down. He initially thinks she's a descendant of the High Elf tribe, but he's wrong. He then decides to finish her by trying to rob his grave. But he stops when she asks why a kid would be locked inside the crystal. He looks at his reflections and is shocked to see his new form. He thinks the reincarnation spell failed, but he doesn't understand why because he used a spell to rebuild his body to a previous form. He expected to be in his Demon Lord form, but he is now in his human form when he was still a hero. Yes, the Demon Lord is a former hero. The girl asks him why he was sealed inside the crystal and checks him out to make sure he's not hurt. She then suddenly hugs him, telling him that Big Sister is there to protect him. He initially gets annoyed but eventually ends up falling fainting. He later wakes up and she gives him some cookies. He thinks that his current body is bad because he fainted from something trivial like hunger, but luckily Celia saved him. She then asks if he's fine, introducing herself as a 15-year-old student from the Holy Swordsman Rearing Institute, and asks for his name. Leonis introduces himself and thinks he can use her to get information about the current world. She repeats his name sometimes and calls it cute. He gets annoyed because his name once meant chaos and terror, but now a random girl calls it cute. He then realizes that his record as the Demon Lord was deleted from history. She asks for his age, and he replies that he's 10. She then asks if he remembers the void monsters that had taken him away, but he's confused. She then explains that voids are enemies from another world, and that she and her school colleagues are knights who wield swords to fight them off. Leonis is initially confused because 1,000 years ago, the enemies of the world were people like him, Demon Lord and the goddess of rebellion. Celia then explains she and Regina were investigating these ruins because they suspect it's a void base. He realizes that she found him by coincidence, but she said that the door was sealed until she touched it. He then asks her what year it is. She says they're in year 64, which confuses him. They suddenly hear a big explosion, and Celia receives a message from Regina stating she encountered large voids. Celia immediately holds onto Leonis, stating she will protect him. An ogre void comes through the door and Celia tries to shoot it down, He gets all annoyed they're destroying his grand mausoleum and decides to use his magic to stop it, just to trip and fall flat on his face. She tells him to back down and shoots the void, but it only tickles him. Suddenly, a laser beam destroys the void's arm and shoots its body down. It's Regina and her huge cannon. The void gets up and Regina changes her cannon form to shoot it in the chest. Despite being surprised to see Linus, Regina simply tells Celia to take away and escape while she holds the void down. The two run away, and Linus thinks nothing went according to his plan. His reincarnation spell failed and he reverted to his human form before he became a demon lord. His grand mausoleum is now infested by aliens, who are destroying everything. He wants to deal with them, but he can't because the girls are there, and if he shows his power, he won't be able to use Celia to get more information about the world. Celia then says they're about to reach the surface, but a crystal suddenly collapses on the ground and turns into a wyvern void. This is nothing like the wyverns he's used to. Celia tells Linus to run away while she deals with the monster. Her gun then turns into a sword and she prepares to deal with it. But Linus simply ignores it and starts casting his spell to destroy the monster. Celia for some reason pushes Linus away, telling him to run and gets sliced in the gut. She lays on the floor in a pool of her blood and Linus wonders why she did it. She says her last words, telling him to run and escape with Regina. But Linus gets closer to her. The wyvern gets closer and a second void appears. She apologizes for not protecting him and closes her eyes. Linus holds her hand until her last breath but thinks she's an idiot. He only kept her to gain more information, but she decided to sacrifice herself to protect him. In fact, he could have used his power to easily block the wyvern's weak attack. He wanted more information, but he didn't think she had value to him anymore. However, she reminded him of Rosalia when she protected him, revealing that when Linus was the hero, he was betrayed by the people he tried to save. That's why he became the Demon Lord. More voids appear and try to attack him, but his magic barrier manages to block it all. He thinks it's annoying to have his human form because he regained his emotions. The voids continue to unleash attacks, all parried away. He then turns around and summons his staff. He tells the voids that he grew attached to Celia's courage and decides to punish the voids for disturbing his castle. He casts a level 8 gravity spell, smashing a void with the pressure. Another void tries to attack, but he simply blocks it with his barrier and modifies it to attack with spikes. The last void starts flying away to escape, but he simply jumps and casts another level 8 fire spell to fry it down. However, there was something he didn't expect. The void's bones remained after using the spell, something that never happened even against dragons. He thinks it's because his current mana levels are a third of what they used to. He then notices Celia is just barely alive. He normally wouldn't care about human lives because he's the Demon Lord, but he still acknowledges her because she tried to protect him. He cannot use holy spells to heal her, but he can use all spells related to death. So, he decides to use his power to give her life. He uses a spell that restores all her lost blood into her body, healing her wounds. Meanwhile, Regina manages to finish off the ogre void and tries to contact Celia, who's still unconscious. Linus hears it and finds it impressive that humanity's technology managed to advance that much. Celia then finally wakes up and immediately hugs him, relieved he's safe. She then checks her wounds and doesn't know how she's fully healed. She's confused because she's sure she died. Linus then explains he used his holy magic to heal her back, but she doesn't know what magic is. He then realizes Celia and Regina didn't use spells to fight the voids, but they used their weapons, which was made out of advanced magic. He realizes that in the current age, people can't use magic, so they use magic weapons that require no training or hard work. Still confused, Celia asks if he used the power of a holy sword, but he doesn't understand. She explains that some holy swords have healing powers in the Excalibur Academy. She believes he can use that power, and believes that's why he was abducted by voids. She then gives a whole explanation of what is holy swords. Basically, they're powers awakened by mankind to fight voids 60 years ago. Humanity almost lost the war against the voids, but children awakened the holy sword power to manipulate fire, wind, and others. He realizes that this power is different from the one he uses, so he decides to hide it from everyone. Regina then arrives, and the girls ask what happened to the void. Linus lies, saying it disappeared while he was shaking in fear. They then decide to leave the ruins, and Celia asks Linus to join her on her bike, which confuses him. He joins her and they drive back to the academy, while Regina keeps teasing Linus. After a long drive, Linus has finally a view of the city, and he realizes that it's the 7th Assault Garden, As they go to the city, Celia starts to recall her childhood memories from 6 years ago. She lived in the third assault garden, but one day they were attacked by voids. Every human stood up to fight those voids, while the rest awaited the result inside a bunker. We see that Celia and Regina, her maid, are inside the bunker. Regina was afraid of what was going on, but Celia tried to comfort her. That doesn't work, as Regina says that voids have destroyed every city they have attacked. Celia tells her to calm down because her parents are holy knights, and they will protect everyone. Celia then starts quoting her parents' and sister's words, mentioning what they will do after defeating the voids. Regina finally starts to calm down and the two girls smile. They promise they will join the Excalibur Academy and also become holy knights to protect people. However, the situation outside isn't as happy. The bunker is shaking with the explosions and Celia starts to panic. She tries to head outside and join her family in the fight, but Regina stops her. The two girls start tearing away, worried about their family. A few hours later, the bunker's door finally opens. Everyone steps outside and sees their city destroyed. Celia starts to tear down and apologizes to Regina. She told her that everything would be okay, but it all ended up being a lie. Back to the present, Regina asks Leonis if this is his first time seeing an assault garden. He replies with yes, describing it as incredible. She then explains that the city is docked there right now, but the city is usually in movement, as it's used on the front lines to attack void colonies. She explains the city can produce power and food and can also cross the ocean. Leonis is confused, not knowing how something this big can move. He decides that he must analyze the human forces before he starts his preparation to restore his Dark Lord's army. After getting into the city, Celia explains that people who can use the power of a holy sword must enroll in the Excalibur Academy. They aren't forced to fight the voids directly, but they must cooperate during the war. Leonis thinks this is an opportunity to learn more about holy swords. The girls then say they will meet him once he finishes his inspection. After they leave, Leonis steps into the bathroom and starts to freak out because his spell didn't work as intended. He was supposed to reincarnate 1,000 years into the future in his Dark Lord form, but he was reincarnated in his previous human hero form. He then calls two names, Blackas and Sherry, who appear from his shadow. Sherry is his personal maid, while Blackas is his most trusted friend, the Prince of the Realm of Shadows. Leonis says that it's been a while since they last met, but Blackas asks him about his new form. Leonis starts petting Blackas, explaining that due to a mistake, he ended up in his original human body. Blackas mentions this is his first time seeing Leonis' hero form. Sherry then finally speaks and reveals that she finds Leonis' new form pretty adorable. He gets mad and asks if she's mocking him. The cute girl starts to panic, but Leonis lets it off, mentioning he called them because he needs a favor. He asks them to investigate the city, explaining this is a whole different future when compared to the one he imagined. He explains people don't use magic anymore, but they have some strange power. Blackas mentions that he can smell a different type of power. Leonis then says that his goal is to regain his Dark Lord army, but they first need to know everything they can. The two then return to his shadow and start their investigation. He then goes through the inspection process, where he is sprayed with something. Some machines then start analyzing his data and he continues to walk forward. He tries to pass through some sort of detector that raises an alarm, but he manages to use a spell to deactivate it. After finishing the inspection, he's given a temporary ID card. Celia appears and snatches the card from him to take a picture of it. He's a bit confused by it, but she explains that it proves his identity in the city. She then tells him it's time to visit the academy and tells him to hop on her bike. Celia takes him on a little tour around the city, showing him the huge commercial district, which shocks Leonis. He mentions that everything seems peaceful in the city, which prompts an explanation from Celia. She says the 7th Assault Garden has never been subjected to a void invasion because it's the newest city. Yet, they're currently building a new one. She also reveals that the Holy Swordsmen are deployed to the front lines to fight, but the city is secure. The city is divided into 3 parts: the residential area, the commercial districts, and the administration. In the center of the city, you will find the Excalibur Academy, which controls the military. After they arrive, Celia says he needs to first wash up before handling his registration. However, Leonis is pretty impressed with the number of huge buildings around and asks if it's part of the academy. Celia confirms and starts to explain the buildings and what they're used for. The most relevant ones are the dining halls, the training grounds, and the dance hall. Leonis is a bit confused. He doesn't understand why they have a dance hall. Celia explains that it is needed to manifest his holy sword because his heart and spirit need to be calm. She shows him the girls' dormitory, but they're stopped by Muselle. Leonis notices that Celia is trying to avoid him, but the guy tries to stop them. He asks her who Leonis is, but she simply says that Muzel has nothing to do with it. The guy starts mocking Celia. He laughs and says that Celia's platoon is now accepting kids because they're all failures. Celia says that Leonis is a certified holy swordsman, but the guy tells her to stop joking. Leonis, on the other hand, thinks this guy was blessed with ignorance. He knows that he might look harmless because he looks like a kid, so he decides to not punish this guy to avoid any attention. Muzel then tells Celia to stop trying to be a holy sword user and join his platoon. He claims they're the top rankers, and if she joins, she will be allowed to stay in the academy. He smirks while calling her a failure who cannot manifest a holy sword despite carrying the blood of holy swordsmen. Celia lowers her head, accepting reality, but Leonis is pretty confused that she cannot manifest a holy sword. He then remembers that she couldn't use that power in the ruins, and that's why she took the hit to protect him. He then questions what she's doing in a school for holy swordsmen. Muzel then shows his real personality. He tells her to come to his platoon and become his toy, like the other girls. This way, she will avoid going on dangerous missions. Leonis thinks the guy is using some mind control magic on the girls, but he then realizes that must be the power of Muzel's holy sword. Celia declines, making the guy mad. She then tries to continue on her way with Leonis, but the guy gives into his emotions and starts grabbing her hair. Leonis tells Muzel to stop, but the guy is simply confused. Leonis then releases a spell and Muzel's body starts shaking in fear, not knowing what's going on. He gets onto his knees in pain and Leonis gets close to him. Leonis gets close to Muzel's ear and tells him some words. He claims that Celia is his woman and that Muzel has no right to touch her. Leonis stops using his magic, giving Muzel the opportunity to activate his holy sword. However, another student arrives and says that using the holy sword's power without authorization is against the academy's rules. The situation is even worse because he's in the sector of the girls' dorm. Muzel starts walking away before wetting his pants. Leonis then thinks to himself that he cannot believe that he got worked up because of a stupid fly, but he doesn't regret it. He considers himself the most forgiving of all Dark Lords, but Celia is one of his minions. Meanwhile, Celia is all happy and thanks the girl for helping them. The girl is Elfine and mentions that seems like Muzel is eyeing Celia up. She then asks if Leonis is the boy she saved on the ruins, and Leonis notices something. Celia's friends are filled with huge plots. Elfine explains she is Celia's platoon operator, making Leonis realize that they've always been in communication. Leo introduces himself and Elfine welcomes him to the academy. She then gives him his uniform and asks Celia if they will register his holy sword. Celia says that Leonis first needs a shower and asks if Elfine is heading to the dormitory. Elfine explains she first needs to submit the void investigation data to the Knights, mentioning there's something under the ocean. Leonis gets curious about it but ignores it for now. But Elfine stops explaining the situation because Celia is starting to feel dizzy. Leonis realizes it's almost time and they head to her team's dormitory. Celia explains the assigned dorms are based on the platoon's grades. She explains each platoon has 5 or 6 members, and the academy treats them on a merit system. There are tournaments, practice matches, and examinations to decide the ranks of each platoon. She explains her team's dorm has air conditioning, new training equipment, a jet bath, and a sauna. Leonis thinks a jet bath is a weapon, but she tells him to get in. He then asks if it's okay for him to enter a girl's dorm, but she says that he's too little so they wouldn't care. She starts making herself at home, and Leonis is confused because she has no sense of shame. She tells him to take a bath and he follows her orders. While showering, he thinks about how things changed since he was last alive. Suddenly, Celia also comes in. She has no real sense of shame, boys. She starts washing his hair and decides to tell him her plot, pun intended. She explains that her parents were deleted by Void 6 years ago. Only she survived along with Regina. She then clears Leonis' doubts, explaining that her parents were 2 holy swordsmen, so she was supposed to also use the power of the holy sword. She was accepted into the academy because of that, but she cannot awaken her holy sword. That's why she wanted to explore the ruins, because she hoped to awaken her true power when she was in danger. Leonis calls her reckless, but she explains that if she doesn't awaken her power she will be expelled. She then starts to feel weaker and falls. Leonis realizes she has reached her limit, and touches his spell mark placed on her body. Her eyes suddenly turn crimson red and her canine teeth get bigger. She tries to reach him with her hand, and he pulls her into him. Upon getting up, she bites onto his neck and starts to feel better. She's confused as to why she had bitten him, but he decides to tell her the truth. He had to use his magic to turn her into his strongest minion, a vampire queen. She gets confused, but he explains that in reality, she is already dead. Later, Celia wakes up on her bed, confused about what happened. Linus explains that she collapsed due to lack of mana, and he had to give her some of his. She doesn't understand what he's trying to say and asks about Linus' real identity. He simply says that he's an ancient sorcerer who resurrected from the crystal, and that he uses powers that have been already forgotten. He also shares that his sorcery can only control death, and he can't really heal or revive her. Since he cannot use holy sorcery, he could only save her by raising her as an undead. She asks if he cannot use the holy sword power. Linus reveals he used a level 10 spell named Create Elder Undead. To be fair, he wasn't even sure the spell would work. However, she came back as the strongest of all undead minions, the Vampire Queen. She gets worried about being a vampire, but Linus explains that she lacked mana, so she had to drink some of his blood due to her vampiric impulses. She believes his story, and he apologizes for not being able to properly save her. She asks if she can share her story, and Linus agrees to listen. She tells him what happened 6 years ago, how she lost her city to avoid attack, along with her parents. She says that her parents were both holy sword users, who tried their best to protect the city. However, she feels sad because she had to be in a shelter with Regina. Since then, she's been training to awaken the holy sword and fight voids. She then asks him if she can still manifest a holy sword, but he doesn't know about it. He simply tells her that she's now a lot stronger because of her vampire queen nature. She's still a bit worried, but the mood changes when Lena's stomach makes some noise. She laughs it off and mentions that he has already spent more time in a girl's room when compared to eating. They head to the cafeteria where she asks if she can still eat normal food because she's now a vampire. Linus replies she can because she's a high-ranking one. She will recover mana from eating, but it takes too much time, so it's not the most efficient way to regain her strength. She asks if he has decided what he wants to order. He asks for bread because he doesn't know most of the dishes. She tells him that he must have a balanced diet, but he dismisses it, mentioning undead don't need it. This strikes her down, and he realizes that she's not used to the fact that she has become an undead. He apologizes to her and ends up following her suggestion. He then mentions that he has money and pulls out a gold coin. Deep down, he's bragging to himself about how rich a demon lord is. Celia asks him what he is, and he tries to explain himself as a rich guy who can buy the whole restaurant. Turns out that he's a broke dude. Celia explains real gold or money is useless in today's age because everything is bought with credits. That hits him like a brick. They then heard a girl talking to two guys in the background. The guys complain that she isn't wearing the school's uniform and try to take advantage of the situation. When one of them grabs her, she quickly knocks them down with her wooden sword. The girl then tells them off, stating she has permission to dress like that, and the guys start running. Celia quickly runs to the girl and calls her Sakuya. She asks what happened, and Sakuya explains everything. She was supposed to be in a tactical drill, but Sakuya snuck out because it was boring and decided to gamble until she got caught by those two guys. She then focuses on Linus, explaining that Elfine already mentioned him. Celia keeps her version, stating he was abducted by voids and she saved him. Sakuya then introduces herself and shakes his hand. He quickly notices that she's someone who dedicated her whole life to the sword, and wonders how much she has trained. Celia then reveals Sakuya is her platoon's vanguard attacker and ends up paying for everyone's lunch. While eating, Linus asks Sakuya why she's dressed like that. Sakuya explains that's the traditional clothing of her homeland and a memento of her sister. Her village was attacked and destroyed by voids, and she was the only survivor. So now, she's training to get stronger and get her revenge. Linus apologizes for asking about such circumstances, and Sakuya explains that usually, people must wear the academy's attire. But since it's a memento from her sister, she somehow got special permission to wear it. After the meal, Celia and Linus head to the training grounds to register his holy sword. There he meets Alto, the instructor in charge of his examination. She explains she will examine him to determine what type of holy sword he has. He then summons his demon lord staff and Alto questions his abilities. Linus simply says he's a support who can do all sorts of stuff based on the situation. He then notices some robots around and asks about them. Celia explains those robots are void simulators. In short, they can copy void combat patterns. Alto tells Linus to fight it since it's set to the low level. He thinks a level 2 gravity spell should be enough to finish this quickly, but that ends up destroying all the robots. Celia and Alto cannot believe it. Alto questions how he crushed that robot and asks if his holy sword is really a support type. She wants to know more about it and everyone around starts looking at them. She then starts programming the void simulator to a higher level, but they're interrupted by the annoying Muzel. He wants to handle the examination. Linus says he doesn't mind, but he also mocks Muzel by saying he's on the same level as the robots. The guy gets so enraged that he ends up calling his holy sword Harry Potter wand. His pet girls also call up air weapons, but Celia claims that a 5-on-1 isn't fair. But Muzel simply claims that his holy sword has the ability to control others as his weapon. Yet, Linus arrogantly says he will just defeat the 5 noobs. Celia decides to join and help him, falling into Muzel's plan, because he will allow her to help Linus under one condition. If she loses, she will join his platoon and become his toy. Linus knows that Muzel simply wants to clap Celia and decides to take advantage of it. He accepts that condition, but if Muzel loses, he must never bother Celia again. As you know, the guy is so dumb that he ends up being overconfident and accepts. Linus tells her that he won't allow anyone to touch his girl, and Celia starts blushing. Celia then asks Alto for a training sword, a holy sword replica made for training. After setting up their positions, they decided to start. Celia quickly dashes forward and knocks one of the girls down. She then goes for Muzel, but another girl comes to block it. Linus simply watches, thinking that her raw attributes improved since she became a vampire queen. One of the other girls smashes her weapon to the ground, forcing Celia to parry the pebbles. Muzel, being the typical loser, tells one of his pets to deal with Linus while Celia is distracted. The girl rushes forward and attacks with lightning, but Linus simply uses a low-level spell to block it with his shadow, and then he uses it to restrain the girl. Celia then starts getting the advantage against the 2 girls she's fighting against. The third comes forward, but Celia takes her down. Celia then decides to deal with Muzel, but he simply uses his wand to stop her from moving. She's a bit confused about what's happening, but he explains this is his real power, the Holy Sword of Dominion. He knocks the sword out of her hands and explains all the dirty things he will do to her later. But first, he decides to deal with Linus, who's a bit cornered. He's still restraining the first girl, but the other 3 got up and are surrounding him, 4 now with Muzel. Linus thinks he could use a level 2 spell and wipe them out in an instant, but he suddenly hears Celia. She's talking to herself, mentioning how much she wants to protect him. She then begs her holy sword to appear. Her strong desire makes a bright light appear on her hands. The light then transforms into a holy sword. Regina, who was watching, could not believe her eyes. With her holy sword, Celia manages to break free from the restraints. Muzel is clearly your loser who cannot believe what's happening, giving Celia the chance to rush forward. She destroys his wand in half, releasing all the girls in his control. Without any other option, he gives up like the little loser he is. Everyone starts cheering for Celia, including Regina, who immediately hugs her. She's so happy that she managed to awaken her power, and Celia can barely believe she managed to do it. Later, she thanks Linus for helping her, but he dismisses it, explaining she did it because of her duty. She's a bit confused, but he simply replies that her duty is to protect her master, him. She doesn't understand, but she laughs it off and promises to protect him. She pats him and decides to ask him for a favor. She wants him to make her stronger and asks him to join her platoon. He quickly accepts the deal. They throw a welcoming party, where Regina cooks a huge feast. But this party is also to celebrate Celia's holy sword awakening. Elfine and Sakuya congratulate her, and they mention his performance during the examination. They quickly talk about whether Celia already named her holy sword, but she dismisses it. Elfine then tells Linus to come to her room so she can analyze his skills, and that drives the real conversation to begin. There are no more open rooms in their dorm, so Linus will have to stay with someone. Regina quickly jumps into the conversation. She wants that clap session. She even promises to make him sweets every day. Sakuya also wants a piece of that, despite being out most of the day. Elfine joins, stating she has tons of plot in her room. Linus has so many options, but Celia jumps in between. She considers herself his guardian, therefore she will make sure he's cozy at night. The girls suspect something, but Linus mentions he'd rather stay with Celia. Not because the winter is cold, but because that will allow the 2 of them to keep their secrets. Especially because she will need to get mana from his blood. As promised, Linus goes to Elfine's room to be examined. She uses her holy sword Eye of the Witch to scan his data. Linus is impressed about it, but she says that she can use it for now. He's confused, but she explains that she lost her holy sword powers and her capabilities are now limited. She reveals she was part of the 7th platoon, which used to be the strongest group with her as their main attacker. They would usually go on void extermination missions until 6 months ago. They were investigating some ruins and were attacked by voids. By the time they realized it was a trap, it was too late. The group fell apart and she was the only survivor. She then lost most of her power and shut herself in her room. but Celia visited her so much that she accepted to join the platoon. She then finishes scanning his biological data and finds something interesting. It says that Linus enjoys staring at plot. She tells him that being naughty isn't good. He then notices a map on her monitor and asks if he can check it. She agrees and gives him a tablet with the map. While checking it, Linus notices the void distribution area over the last few months. He then calls forth Blackas and finds out from him that the voids have similar characteristics to the monsters the Dark Lords used against mankind. He then orders Blackas to investigate the spots presented on the map. Blackas disappears and Sherry suddenly appears. She also has a report. She found out something about humanity. They learned how to make donuts. Linus tastes it and finds it delicious. Sherry starts pulling more food from her bag, and he understands that she's only been eating for the whole time. He gets a bit annoyed, but she explains that she also got some information. People don't know about any demon lord. They don't even know about ancient gods or the war between the Dark Lords and the 6 heroes from 1,000 years ago. He asks her to continue her investigation. Sherry then mentions that Celia became Linus' minion. He wonders why she sounds so upset, but she just ignores him while calling him a dummy. He gets annoyed, mentioning Celia is a vampire queen who can use the mysterious holy sword power. She will be their first step to reform his demon lord's army. She gets angry and says she hates him while disappearing. Meanwhile, there's a group of divers investigating the underwater ruins. They find a huge tree with a face. The tree starts calling Linus' name and attacks the divers. We then get to know about Linus' past as the hero. He was on a mission to defeat an evil monster, being guided by a villager. The villager is pretty happy as they will be helped by Linus, who is considered the greatest swordsman and the hero of the Holy Sword. The villager complimented Linus' skills, who simply dismissed it, mentioning his job was to defeat the demon lord. The two arrived at the monster's location, but Linus was confused because the spot was empty. He turned back to ask the villager where the monster was. However, the villager had disappeared. Linus then realizes this is a trap and tries to reach out for his weapon. However, some gravity magic was cast on him to restrain him. He sees 3 mages around him, and then some soldiers also appear. The soldiers quickly grab some chains and restrain him in the air. The nobles of the kingdom didn't like Linus' power or influence, so they decided to wipe him out. The soldiers quickly ran forward with their spears and stabbed Linus in the chest. He tried to resist, but in the end, he lost all his strength. The soldiers put him down, commented on how their job was done, and walked away. Minutes later, a girl appears before him. She knows he can still hear her, and asks him how he feels after being betrayed by the people he saved. Linus had negative thoughts, yet he couldn't resent humanity for betraying him. She asks what he thinks about this world, but Linus didn't care about it because he was about to die. The girl then reveals that she wishes to rebel against the world. Linus is confused, but she explains that she's Roselia, the goddess of rebellion. She holds his hand, promising to revive him not as a hero, but as the new Dark Lord who will save the world. Linus wakes up from that dream, reminding himself that he must fulfill his promise of finding Roselia in the current timeline. He then noticed something was wrong with his neck. He was bitten. He immediately gets into Celia's room and orders her to get up. Since his minion, she immediately gets up, confused about what he did. He shows her the master contract mark, explaining he can simply order her around, and she cannot refuse his orders. She suddenly gets flustered and asks if he can also literally order her to do plot actions. Linus explains that he won't order her to do those kinds of things. She rests assured, deciding to believe that Linus will always be trustful. Linus then changes the topic, asking if she sucked his blood while he was asleep. She gets shy, mentioning she sucked a little because she couldn't help herself in the middle of the night. Linus replies that he doesn't mind about it because she's his minion. However, she should first say something to him. She understands and apologizes to him. They're then interrupted when her phone starts ringing. Celia picks up Elfine's call and asks her the reason for the sudden call. Elfine then reports there is something strange. The 13th platoon should be investigating the seabed, but they haven't returned yet. They're known for being a skilled group, but there is no news yet. Elfine says she will continue investigating the case and will give her an update later. Celia then mentions Linus' promise that he would train her, and he agrees to head to the training grounds. Meanwhile, the Excalibur's Academy staff is having a meeting. They're pretty worried about the 13th platoon and ask about their collected data. They find out there's a void colony in the seabed beneath the assault city. They think the voids will probably attack the city in a large group. They wonder if they couldn't get any signs before. However, they have no technology capable of detecting a void lord ahead of time. One of the staff members asks how many voids could be found in the colony. But the answer is worried. Several hundred, if not more. They become worried because there's a huge chance that a Void Lord will appear in this attack. They start planning their defenses. They need to evacuate the civilians and find the Void Lord. One of the staff orders for the academy defenses to be tightened and orders all platoons to work on leading the civilians to safety. In the meantime, Celia is practicing her skills against 2 robots. But it's quite easy for her, especially because they come one at a time. Linus compliments her skills and asks her if she has someone to teach her swordsmanship. Celia reveals that her family taught her the basics when she was young, and since then, she's always been practicing, but her progress is now slow. Linus then mentions that she now should be stronger because she's also a vampire queen. She can barely believe it. Linus explains that she's not used to using the vast mana reserves on her body. He tells her that if she manages to learn how to use it, her strength will be increased by a lot. She asks for his guidance and Linus summons his staff. He says that he will give her a more realistic opponent and casts a barrier around. He then uses a summoning spell to create several skeleton soldiers from the shadow. She's confused, but he simply explains those are his lowest ranking minions, and that she is free to destroy them however she wishes. She then decides to start slicing the skeletons one by one. She dodges when 2 skeletons attack her from both sides, and Linus takes this chance to summon even more soldiers. After some minutes, Linus notices her tired and decides to stop. He returns his skeletons to the shadows and asks if she needs him to give her some mana. She says that she's fine, and he compliments her skills again. He then decides to return to the dorm, but she asks him if he wants to have a meal with her. He refuses to, but his stomach makes some noise. She starts laughing, and he gets annoyed with his body. Meanwhile, Sakuya was stepping out of the dorm when she noticed Blacka's outside. She likes his appearance so much that runs toward him. She thinks that he has a noble aura and decides to give him a name until she finds his owner. She calls him Fluffimaru the Black. Of course, Blacka's hates that name, but she simply ignores it, thinking he likes it. She decides to warp his neck with a piece of cloth, mentioning it has food inside. She then walks away, mentioning they will meet again. Meanwhile, inside Elfine is trying to get more data when both Regina and Sakuya get in. Sakuya is pretty hyped up, mentioning how she just met Blackas. They then focus on the new investigation, as a new group is sent to locate the Void Lord. However, they haven't returned yet. This was an even better group than last time. We then return to Celia and Linus. They're cruising through the city on her bike, heading to get their lunch. We also find out that Sherry is doing her best to get information. Well, her type of information is all about getting part-time jobs in food shops and cooking lessons. The cooking teacher comes with a bowl of potatoes, explaining she will be learning how to make fries. He explains the potatoes must be sliced in even pieces, but Sherry doesn't wait. She simply pulls out her knife and slices everything, potatoes and bowl included. The guy is so shocked and asks what she has done, but she simply replies she did what he told her to. The owner then orders her to clean up outside, where she sees Celia and Linus stopping by. She tries to hide herself from them, while Celia buys some goods from the shop. They then go back to the bike and ride away. Sherry is curious about where they're heading, but the two later stop by an orphanage. Linus is confused, but Celia explains that it's a restaurant and an orphanage. The orphans quickly step outside, happy to see Celia. She then explains that this place takes care of refugee children with nowhere to turn. Somehow, Linus can resonate a bit with these children because he also was a homeless orphan before becoming the hero. Upon getting inside, Celia apologizes because she couldn't visit them earlier due to her exams. One of the kids sneaks behind her to do something interesting, but Linus gets mad that someone is doing that to his minion. He uses his magic to attack the kid but stops when Celia tells him that it's fine. The owner of the place comes down. She's Frenia. She introduces her to Leo, explaining he's a boy she saved in the ruins. She tells her that he's also a holy swordsman, which makes all the kids cling to him, thinking he's amazing. Celia then tells them that she brought some vegetables and donuts for the kids. The kids get all happy and Frenia mentions she will be preparing lunch soon. Meanwhile, the other group is investigating underneath the city and notices something wrong. At the same time, Sakuya wakes up from her nap with a strange feeling. Turns out that there are some vines growing inside the control room of the assault city. Watch this next video. See you on the next one.